Good morning. Today is Monday, October 4th. Welcome to Meditation 103. Let's begin by setting our intention, motivation with the Four Immeasurables prayer. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from the happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Well, since it's been a few weeks since we've had class, maybe we'll just do like a quick review and meditation. Let's start by doing the 9 purifying breaths. I think there may be a few newcomers today, so you can sit cross-legged on the cushion. I use a little cushion. It helps to get your hips either level or above your knees, maybe, if you're just starting. Some people like to put one leg up over the other. Really, what's ever comfortable. You could be in a chair as well. If you're in a chair, make sure your feet are flat and your hips are level or above your knees. So you don't want to be like kind of slouched back. You want to be more upright. That's the important thing, is that the important thing is to be upright, so the channels, the subtle body channels, which we'll talk about in a minute, are straight. So you want a straight back, but not a rigid back. You don't want to be like tight. You just want to be relaxed and straight. Shoulders just back a little bit, not like at attention, but not down, So it's kind of a relaxed, alert pose. And arms, you can do like this. This is the palm into the back of the hand and resting. This. Some people do. Ring finger to the thumb. Whatever's comfortable there. Head should be straight, Chin slightly down. In Tibetan Buddhist tradition, meditate with the eyes open for the most part, which we do here. But whatever you're looking at, and it doesn't really matter what you're looking at. Hopefully it's not something that's going to distract you or take your mind somewhere else. You don't space out your gaze, nor do you look intensely at something. So it's more of a relaxed, lightly touching with your eyes whatever's in front of you. And you can put something inspiring, like a photograph of a teacher or a Buddha, a Thangka, a flower. Or you can look out at a view. Just something that's not going to kind of create a story that's going to take you away from what you're doing. With the mouth, the jaw should be relaxed, the teeth not clenched, and you can have your mouth closed, but like your teeth a little bit apart, or your mouth slightly open. Better with your mouth probably closed, but not your teeth kind of clenched. Your tongue usually goes behind where the upper teeth meet the roof of your mouth. That's a basic posture. You don't have to feel locked into it, where you can't move or anything. It should be just relaxed. If you have to shift, you shift. You just go, continually go back into this posture. And, you can take the attitude of taking your seat with a certain majesty or dignity, both. That you're making a commitment to do something for the benefit of all beings ultimately, but, yourself and others around you immediately as well. Like we say in the Four Immeasurable prayers, you're setting your motivation for these practices, not just for you, just for you to feel good. Let's do the 9 purifying breaths. Before we do that, because I like doing it and going right into the meditation. We focus on our breath in meditation, at least in the beginning. We breathe through the nose, unless you can't. If you're stuffed up or something, then you breathe through your mouth. And it's not a deep breath, and it's not a shallow breath. It's a relaxed breath. And focus on it. Take a few breaths. And focus on the place where it goes in and out, between your nostrils and upper lip there. Focus your attention on that. Now, being in the posture, focusing on that breath, you should immediately feel a bit of a sense of calming down, grounding. At least I did just now. That's going to be the practice. So what we do in meditation is, and the big misconception is that it's about not thinking, which it's not. You're going to be thinking pretty much until you're dead. So let's let's get used to it. It's what you do with the thought. Actually, the thought helps your meditation, because what the thought does, if we start applying a technique, is reminds us to go into a state of awareness and openness and mindfulness. For example, we're in the posture, we start breathing, we're focusing on the breath, and I start thinking about what I'm doing. At 6 o'clock tonight, I have to meet somebody for dinner. Because I'm making this attempt to calm myself, to steady myself, to steady my body and my breath, hopefully the mind will follow, right? The goal, the whole crux of this practice is to have your awareness of mind, which is the bigger mind, which is like space, which is connected to our Buddha nature ultimately. Become aware of the thoughts as they arise, the small thoughts, the constant chatter of us interfacing with, physical reality, interfacing with life and interfacing with others and relationships and conditioned behaviors and our karma and things like that. So we're in the posture, we're breathing. I have to meet somebody at 6 o'clock. My awareness realizes that I'm thinking, because I'm making an effort to do that by putting myself in this posture, committing, taking my seat with dignity and committing to practice of meditation. So now I realize that I'm not only thinking about going to have dinner at 6, I'm thinking about going to dinner at 6. That is the key. I'm becoming aware of the fact that I'm thinking about what I'm doing at 6, which is not connected to my present. I'm not having dinner right now. I'm not getting dressed for dinner right now. So this is not connected to my immediate circumstance, right? Once I realize that I'm thinking about that I have moved away from the focus on my breath, I go back to the breath. So the thought actually helps us to go back to the practice of meditation, the posture, settling, the breath, focus on the breath. Or some of us do the technique of using the image, the metaphor of the sky, a completely blue, stainless, limitless, clear sky as the nature of our mind, the spacious quality of our mind, which is when we're really calm, at peace. And the thought, like I said, of what I'm going to do later arises like a cloud in that space. And you can do two things here. One is you get lost in that cloud. Now, not only do I know I have to have dinner at 6, should I bring a gift when I meet this person? How should I get there? Should I take the subway? Last time I took the subway, that line had delays. Maybe I should walk to the other one 3 blocks over, take that other subway. But if I take that other subway, I might need an umbrella because it's further away. You know, you get lost. This chain of thought started with dinner at 6. Now I'm on umbrellas. You know, and then I could easily say, well, my friend gave me that umbrella. I got to call him because he was sick last week. Now I'm on my sick friend, and I started out on dinner at 6. This is how we've lived our lives. In Buddhist perspective, countless lives. You know, there's an endless stream of chain of thought, and that's what we're working with here. We're working with those thoughts, and we're using those thoughts to help us go back to meditate. So if you use that metaphor of the cloud, the thought of me going to dinner at 6 is this cloud that arises in the sky, and I just imagine it dissipating, the cloud that is that thought or contains that thought dissipating back into the sky, which becomes clear again, and I settle, and I go back to my meditation, to breathing. So there's going back to the breath, keeping your attention on the breath. There's using this imagery of cloud and sky, and you can alternate between those two. The more complicated technique that some of you, I think, have been adopting since we've started here is mind looking at mind. Whereas just the fact that you're able to really connect to that larger awareness and know that it's there and have confidence that it's there. You're focused on what that sky-like mind is doing. And when a thought arises in it, because it will, until we're dead probably, when that thought arises, we just let it go. We leave it where it is. Just the awareness of it is enough to disconnect from it. And then go back to the effort of mind looking at mind. What is that larger mind doing? Back to the awareness of mind looking at mind. Those are the techniques we're doing. So now we're going to start with the 9 purifying breaths, and then we're going to go into a period of 13 minutes of meditation. 9 purifying breaths deals with the subtle body channels, of which there are 3. There's the blue one in the middle, and they're not like capillaries or veins or nerves even. They're really, they could be adjacent to or correspond to some, but really they're channels of energy, basically. The blue one is in the middle. On men, traditionally, the white one's on the right, the red is on the left. But I always encourage everybody to define how they want. That's not really critical. If you define yourself as a man, male or female, or you don't define yourself as either, you don't have to conform to the, you can conform, you know, decide for yourself how you want to configure that. I use the white on the right. So these channels correspond to different emotions. So the center one is about ignorance and not knowing the truth of reality, which corresponds to the view of Buddhism of emptiness, emptiness of inherent existence. If you don't know what that is, there's a great teaching on it, Shunyata by Emptiness or Shunyata by Vesna Wallace in our archives. Ignorance and is the negative emotion corresponding to that blue channel. The white is anger. The red is attachment. So when you breathe in, you're breathing in enlightened energy. In the blue central channel, you know, you're breathing in that enlightened energy of awareness, of realizing the view, of sitting in the view of Buddhism. The right channel of anger, in my case, you're breathing in enlightened energy of patience, of loving kindness and attachment. You're breathing in enlightened energy of contentment and humility and things like that. So we take our right finger, this is like the Vajra fist, you bury your thumb behind the middle finger. You take the right finger, go to your left nostril, breathe into the right channel, which in my case is white. all that enlightened energy of air, of patience, kindness. Down to the navel where the three channels will meet. And then you switch the other hand. Sorry. You just hold it there. You don't switch yet. And then breathe out, and you're breathing out all that anger. You're switching nostrils, not hands. So from this, you go to your left, you breathe in. And then breathe it out. Now we switch to the red, which is on the left side. Breathe out. Breathe in generosity. Breathe out attachment. We take our hands on our knees. Now we're going to breathe both nostrils into the blue channel, the central channel. Breathe out. On the last breath, we're going to imagine we shoot out the breath and merge our consciousness with space, and then we'll take it right into the meditation. And for those, if you really want a better explanation of this, because I'm not so versed in it or good at explaining it, Victoria has a teaching on this. Nick, if you know that one and can post that, that would be cool. If not, it's okay. She'll come back and do it. Last breath, imagine coming out of the crown of your head, merging your consciousness with space. Like a forceful breath. Now let's meditate for 13 minutes. I may speak through it, I may not. Remember, the key is to become aware that you're thinking, and when you do, either go back to the breath, imagine it as a cloud dissipating in the sky, or just use awareness, looking at awareness, to adjust your attention again back to resting in that sky-like nature of mind. It's okay. Don't judge the fact that you're having a lot of thoughts. When you start meditating, you're going to notice you have a lot of thoughts, and even if you're meditating for 10 years, or you may have days where you have tons of thoughts. It's what the mind does. Not to be judged, just to be worked with, that's all. Back to the breath. Thinking again about 6 o'clock, what I have to do. Not that what I'm doing later at 6 is not important. We're not judging these thoughts as important or not important. We're practicing meditation right now. When it's time to go to dinner, I'm going to put my attention towards that. I'm going to dress a certain way and be conscious of it and be mindful of how I'm dressing. I'm going to take a certain route to get there and be mindful about the most efficient, the safest, the quick, meditation is not, becoming someone who's just in this spaced out, formless zone. It's about working with the thought. It's really checking in to see what's going on. I don't need to focus on what I'm doing at 6 o'clock right now. I will, and when I'm at dinner, I'll be present and discuss things with the person I'm meeting and want to be focused on that. I'm not going to be like, I shouldn't be thinking about this conversation. That's not what I'll be applying, because we do talk about using meditation during, practices of meditation, mindful awareness during the course of our daily lives. It's not to check out of immediate current circumstances, actually to check in more to it. So you can be present in an authentic way and not in a neurotic sense where you're just constantly trying to control the game and when write the script at the same time as it's happening or before it's happened or after, revising it after it's happened. Back to the breath. If you find your mind to be particularly busy, you can lower your gaze a little bit. That may just calm it down a bit. And vice versa. If you feel a little groggy almost, sleepy or something, raise your angle of your gaze. The angle of the gaze, I mean. You don't have to change your head position, but just the angle of your gaze. Raise it up and kind of wake you up a bit. If you're using the mind, looking at mind technique, what mind is looking at what mind? What is that awareness that's looking at the thoughts? Realize that you're thinking, become aware of the fact that you're thinking, no matter what it is. You don't have to judge it. Bad thought, good thought, worthy thought, unworthy thought. Just realize it and go back to the breath. Or imagine it dissipating into the sky like a cloud, going back in from where it came. It's almost like you're just lightly touching that thought with your mind, leaving it where it is. Once the only way you can do that is becoming aware, which is why we do this posture and this technique and breathing. We're settling, focusing, and slowing everything down, almost taking the speed of our lives way down, so we have the space to do this, to work with this awareness and work with these thoughts. Back to the breath. Okay, excellent. For those of you who've been doing this for a while, and for those of you just starting, like I said, it's very important not to get critical and judge. This was a bad one, this was a good one. Just as, when you start to practice some kind of spiritual path, you blow up in anger, or you lie, or you do something that you don't want to do, you do something that you wish you hadn't done. You will often, this path is like one step forward, two steps back, or two steps forward, one step back, and various combinations of it. And Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche often says that that's very good. I mean, if you just committed to the spiritual path and had this smooth sailing, and all of a sudden you were just this paragon of virtue and ethics, infallible and stuff, you'd probably become an incredible egomaniac if you aren't one already. And you learn from your mistakes. It's important to not complicate it by beating yourself up for it. Speaking of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, I read his new book that they published, Cynicism and Magic. Nick, if you will, you can show the class this book that I really encourage you to get. We've talked about him a lot. I've mentioned a few of his books. The most famous one, Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, which was a very important book about Tibetan Buddhism came to the West early 70s. It was a big, important one for the development of Buddhism in the West, and U.S. in particular. We're going to talk a little bit about bodhisattva vows. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche says, working in the soil of samsara, the bodhisattva vow acknowledges confusion and chaos, aggression, passion, frustration, frivolousness as part of the path. The path is like a busy, broad highway, complete with roadblocks, accidents, construction work, police. It is quite terrifying. Nevertheless, it is majestic. It is the great path. From today onward until the attainment of enlightenment, I am willing to live with my chaos and confusion, as well as with that of all other sentient beings. I'm willing to share our mutual confusion, so no one is playing a one-upmanship game. The bodhisattva is a very humble pilgrim who works in the soil of samsara to dig out the jewel embedded in it. So, I mean, my objective by starting this class is not to convert people to Buddhism. I'm not a missionary or whatever trying to make more people become Buddhists. But if you are inspired to, as some of you have been, to actually take vows, refuge vows, which is what the vow you take when you become a Buddhist, and you do that with a real, an authentic teacher of an authentic lineage. If you are inspired to do that, I encourage you to do that. I don't encourage you to do that just in general. If you think that's for you, then you should. The bodhisattva. So when you commit to being Buddhism, basically you're taking refuge in the three jewels, which is the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Buddha, we know the Buddha is the Dharma, the teachings, and the Sangha is traditionally the congregation of your fellow Buddhists and your personal teacher, more so. And what does it mean to take refuge in the Buddha? It means you're going to study the Dharma and you're going to practice the Dharma. It's these two things of meditation and learning about the view is what we practice. The Tibetan Buddhist tradition also has the bodhisattva vow, which is what we call the Mahayana. It is included in the Mahayana tradition of Buddhism. Bodhisattva vow. Because before you take a bodhisattva vow, just as a meditator or spiritual pilgrim or practitioner, you can pursue enlightenment by committing to ethical discipline and meditation, and loving kindness and the paramitas, like generosity and loving kindness and compassion and all those things, patience. And commit to this path for enlightenment, for yourself to be enlightened, to to end this cycle of samsara and suffering and rebirth and all those things. Mahayana Buddhism goes a step further in a way by saying, I'm going to hold off my personal enlightenment. I'm going to progress, hopefully, on a spiritual path and move towards that. But, stepping into that kind of ultimate state of, nirvana, as they say, which is not a place like a heaven or something, it's mind, basically, purified and of all these obscurations. It's fully realization, basically, of the truth. I'm going to put off that full enlightenment until all sentient beings, that includes animals and insects and formless beings and, things in other realms and stuff, which I won't get into now. And all human beings, I will not reach that full enlightenment until all human beings become enlightened, and I'm going to commit to be of benefit to all those beings until they reach enlightenment. Whoa! That's the bodhisattva vow, basically. That's a big trip, right? That may take the wind out of your sails, but no, it should not, because the good news is that it is possible to attain enlightenment. It's not just a hypothetical concept. The dynamite exists to create an enormous spark of energy. We may be able to experience the heart of the teachings directly, precisely, and thoroughly, rather than trying to get into the millions of the teachings and sutras, which would be like trying to swim the ocean. The bodhisattva path becomes extremely important because it captures all the principles that the Buddha taught and brings them into an inspiring and workable living situation. There's a willingness to jump into the pattern of the teachings. A new openness happens along with an enormous irony. You're unable to distinguish whether you're treading on the path or you are the path. You lose your reference point. Sometimes you feel you're on the path. Other times you feel like you're simultaneously the path and the traveler. There's a lot of humor in that. So Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche is talking about when you begin to practice, like they talk about the Hinayana. Hinayana discipline is about working with the practice of, mindfulness and emptiness and awareness, learning about the nature of the reality as the Buddha taught it. But as you practice this, you begin to lift your head, as he says, to stick your neck out slightly more. So far, you've been bowing your head to see the texture of the path. Now you raise your head a little bit and begin to see there's a horizon, a meeting point of earth and sky. You also see that you deserve to see and are capable. So it's pretty certain you will walk beautifully and precisely without stumbling on the path. You develop a new kind of genius. You can walk and look far at the same time. That means you have expanded your consciousness to the Mahayana path of openness, complete openness, which is extremely powerful and very real at the same time. Basically talking about, when you do start to learn about the teachings and study the Dharma and meditate, you start to see this path open up in front of you and see a method and see a way, to go through this life. That's where you're not just victim of your, victim and led by your emotions and by your neurosis and by your conditioning and by your past and things like that. You can now commit yourself to the bodhisattva path. The way the sutras describe it, a would-be bodhisattva transplants a new heart into themselves. You might ask, from where am I transplanting this heart? It is from the inspiration and experience of genuine discipline. You're not trying to kid yourself or amuse yourself. You have found the basic experience of Buddha nature through your discipline of Hinayana practice, which we've been working on here. Having found Buddha nature in this way, the nature of mind we'll talk about, you can discover that you can borrow all the hearts of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 quarters of the universe. You take their hearts, transplant them into your heart. Your inspiration is the faith and trust that there was heart already, and now you transplant that heart into your basic being, into your mind. This is known as taking the bodhisattva vow, where you say, from now until attaining enlightenment, I commit myself to the bodhisattva's path. From now until all sentient beings are liberated, I will keep this vow. I will not attain enlightenment until all sentient beings have been saved from the misery of samsara. You enter the bodhisattva's path by the application of the 6 paramitas: generosity, discipline, patience, exertion, meditation, and transcendent knowledge. Your commitment is very powerful because you have trod the path of basic Buddhist discipline, and you've realized that you don't have self-existence in terms of me and my ego. When there is nothing to solidify the commitment into a point of reference in your mind, the commitment becomes wide rather than concentrated on one spot. The commitment is to the cosmos, the universe, and you can do this because of the truth of emptiness, the fact that you don't really exist as you, or exist as you think you do, at least. If you existed, then there would still be some kind of grudge against somebody or other. Maybe the grudge would be against yourself. But from this new point of view, the commitment becomes very real commitment, which is called taking bodhicitta into your heart. Bodhi means awakened state of mind, and citta means heart. The heart of the awakened state of mind has entered your system. You have now become a follower of the Mahayana path, and you have joined the family of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Such a commitment is not at all about saving oneself. Rather, you have something to give sentient beings. You have evolved yourself spiritually enough so that you can give what you have gained to others. That's the purpose of the Bodhisattva vow. You are going to become a teacher while remaining a student. You are going to be the guide for this tour, and you yourself are a tourist. This notion is very important. When you maintain your individual ego, you are incapable of developing a wide vision. But when you lose the sense of individuality, the narrow sense of purpose and discipline and journey, with a much wider range begins to open with no limitations. The basic metaphor is that now you become a warrior, and your vision is extended and open to the point where you don't have any vision. That in itself is inspiring, magnificent, and very humorous at the same time. You can feel it personally, physically, that you have stepped out of something, and now you begin to relate to the whole world. The whole universe becomes extremely powerful. At the same time, it is somewhat painful to take this burden on yourself and not put it on anybody. The reason bodhisattvas keep away from being evangelical or prideful is because they realize as a bodhisattva, you aren't saving anybody, not even yourself. On one hand, you have no idea what you're doing. You have no understanding. The only thing you know is your own suffering and pain and egolessness. Apart from that, there's no understanding. But on the other hand, and beyond that, there's enormous understanding and a complete comprehension that something is happening. Sometimes you feel as though you're fooling yourself. On the other hand, you feel you are not fooling yourself, quite rightly so. This is a very interesting dichotomy. The wide approach and universal vision is fantastic. But at the same time, there's an overlay of chaos and confusion as to how to proceed, how to begin one's journey at all is confusing. But on the Buddhist path, such confusion is cut through. Then he goes into an explanation of all the paramitas. The one on patience I would just want to go over because it's particularly interesting. Patience is greatly misunderstood. The colloquial expression is that patience is a virtue and virtue is grace. But patience is not necessarily a virtue. And patience doesn't particularly belong to the category of virtue or goodness. Patience actually belongs to the category of what is absolute and true, rather than the category of virtue or grace, whatever that may be. It's truth we're talking about when we talk about patience. But truth from this point of view is reality. Reality that can be worked with, reality that is experiential and does not need any reinforcement. You don't have to be patient just because you've been taught to be patient or feel it would be good to be patient. That would be like nibbling all day long instead of settling down and eating a meal. Patience here is very direct, very definite. Not a question of trying to be good or virtuous, but patience, according to the scriptures, is non-aggression. Non-aggression is the patience. And when we talk about aggression, we're not talking about losing your temper and suddenly blowing up. We're talking about aggression in the sense of a constant flow of experience in life with little flickers of aggression here and there. We don't like certain things that are presented, certain things we experience, yet we get caught up. Nobody told us to do this, but we do. And we have opinions of ourselves, certain expectations of ourselves. If those expectations are not met, if our hot tea is cold and our iced tea is hot, we get mad. If we are bold enough, we ask to speak to the manager. That is aggression. I'm not saying that our iced tea should be hot or that our hot tea should be cold. I think you're intelligent enough not to take this too literally. However, there is continual aggression that takes place based on expectations. And expectations are basically aggressive. We expect something. We want to get something out of it. That's not very generous and it's not open. There's a sense of aggression all the time. Basically, we're sensitive. Even if we think ourselves as tough, we're softened by our ego when we meet little irritations here and there. When we expect something to go smoothly and it doesn't, we're devastated. Before we get something we want, we begin to shape ourselves. We do this constantly. If we want an espresso, for example, between the time we order from the waiter and when we get it, we soften ourselves. We shape ourselves into an espresso coffee drinker. We become that way. We give in. And if we don't get what we expected, if something is the slightest bit wrong with our espresso, we attack. This process extends to all kinds of things. We push a button, we shape ourselves. We make ourselves soft very aggressively, expecting we are going to get something out of it. And when we don't, we've already worked out our plan of attack, our demands. That is non-discipline and non-patience. The highest form of patience is non-aggression, non-expectation. Patience does not contain expectation. That does not mean one has to become a robot or a stone wall. We have some sense of intelligence and openness as well as a sense of continuity. Our whole life is based on patience, not expecting anything, while being prepared for everything. Our whole life is based on patience, not expecting anything, while being prepared for everything. That kind of preparation is not regarded as aggression, but rather as inspirational faith and trust, which has been described in the sutras of the teachings of the Buddha. Our whole life is based on patience, not expecting anything, while being prepared for everything. That's one of the paramitas, that he speaks about in reference to the bodhisattva vow. So, bodhisattva vow, if that's something you want to read about in this book, Cynicism and Magic, or other books, I'm sure there's lots of teachings on it from different teachers. If that's something you're inspired to do, if that's a vow you're inspired to take, I encourage you to take it. I'm not saying anybody here should or shouldn't, but if you're inspired to do that, these things kind of supercharge our practice in a way. It's like adding a supplement, nutritional supplement or something to our practice. And it may seem like a very daunting task, but what good is your enlightenment if everyone else around you is suffering, right? How altruistic is that? So if this is something that you're inspired to do, and it's not something to be taken lightly either. It's a real thing. But if you're inspired to do it, I encourage you to do it. If you have any questions, we have a few minutes left to go over some. Is there a temperature of humidity level you prefer? Environmental preferences you hold? I mean, I think it's like anything else. I mean, if sometimes you don't have control over humidity and temperature, but if you do, obviously, it's good to be comfortable relatively, but ultimately you should be able to, might be good practice sometimes to be uncomfortable. and see how well we do. Obviously, we're practicing meditation to bring that kind of awareness and mindfulness into our daily lives, and we're not always, and usually not going to be able to control our environment. Last week, I had my feelings hurt. My anxiety makes me feel like a burden at times. Several friends go to an event. No one would take me along because of my panic attacks. It's hurtful. What's the Buddhist point of view to deal with that kind of rejection and deep hurt? You have to start, you just have to be honest. I mean, are these, I don't know how Buddhist this is, you know what I mean? I'm just talking from, my own point of view. Maybe these people you don't want to be friends with if they can't, or maybe it's something you need to take care of, maybe there's other things you need to be doing to work with your anxiety because it's getting in the way of relationships, and maybe it's both. I mean, from a Buddhist perspective, you could just, realize that they're making decisions based on their own shortcomings, or maybe, I don't know, maybe your anxiety is to a point where they're kind of making a healthy boundary. I don't know all the details, so I can't really say who's right or who's wrong, nor do I want to say that, or who's creating the situation and who's not. I mean, if you're working this out in therapy, it's probably a good thing to talk about. In Buddhas, often my teacher would say, our enemies, and I'm not saying these people are enemies, but anyone who kind of it can be someone who really is an enemy who wants to do you harm or has done you real harm, or it could be someone who just irritates you, or it could be someone you live with, family member that gets on your nerves. Often that type of person that we have those conflicts with can be a teacher, could teach us patience, teach us compassion and things like that. But we have to make, like we do in meditation, become aware that we have this tension, loaded relationship, complex relationship, become aware of it. And often what they do is the teacher, my teacher is taught to imagine that person in a position of, you put that person kind of in a position of respect and reverence above your head, which is often what you do with the Buddha. You imagine the Buddha or Chenrezig or Tara above your head, and you do that to that person. You put that person above your head. So somehow you're relating to them in a different way, and know that the difficulty that this person's creating in their life is giving you an ability to practice. For the last few years, I've been in Bangkok, but now I moved back to the West. I'm visiting family here for a few weeks. Everyone here is Christian. I'm a Buddhist. They don't have any problems. We have dinner. I'm asked to say grace. I oblige them out of courtesy and say things in my own way. Last night I goofed and we had a laugh. Any idea how to pray before meals as a Buddhist? You could say something like, may the food here and drinks, may this be of benefit to all beings, almost like you're making an offering of whatever you're about to eat or consume. You're offering it to all sentient beings. Something like that. Do you have experience with Buddhist retreats? Studying in a monastery? Yeah, I mean, I've done a bunch of different Buddhist retreats. I mean, that's got to be part of your exploration of teachers and Buddhist centers, either in the area where you live or, I know you're in New York. There's a great center called KPL, Kunzang Palchen Ling, which is Drikung Kagyu tradition, which is Garchen Rinpoche's tradition. Actually, he's taught there. Actually, I had teaching from Mingyur Rinpoche, who's offering this bodhisattva vow at that place. It's in Red Hook near Bard College, upstate New York. That's a good place to start. They're doing a retreat very soon, actually, maybe next week. I'm 19 and I've fallen into cycles in the past few months, depression or unhealthy hedonism. I'm wondering, what advice do you have on finding the balance? between seeking pleasure but not falling into feelings of guilt and shame. And how can I implement meditation in order to change this? That's huge, 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 huge topic. Gigantic, you know. You have to be honest with yourself, and you can use study of Dharma and meditation to really begin to get a sense of what's helping and what's not. When hedonism becomes unhealthy, as you say, obviously it's not something you should be doing, and it's not hedonism anymore, right? It's not pleasurable if it's unhealthy, probably, or it's pleasurable for a brief time, and then you have the crashing of guilt and feeling regret and sometimes injury, mentally, physically, from that kind of indulgence. You have to be honest that this, you reach a point in your life that that the negative repercussions of certain actions are going to way outweigh whatever benefit you think you're getting from it, and you have to kind of set on a path to work with it. Pema Chodron has taught extensively on this topic. I think maybe The Places That Scare You, that book, Pema, Pemachhodron. She's taught about Shenpa, Shenpa, which is attachments, charged attachment, and really will speak to. Google Pema Chodron teachings on Shenpa. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to fall into feelings of guilt and shame, but from moments of unhealthy hedonism, but you also don't want to just justify it and say, well, it's okay. You can, you want to make a commitment not to do it, because unhealthy hedonism is unhealthy, as you say, and it does, it's not, if you're trying to make progress in spirituality, this is going to derail you. And the depression may be very much linked to the unhealthy hedonism. When you go up, be it drugs or whatever, it could be sex, it could be food, it could be whatever kind of, unhealthy hedonism you're talking about. When that's your serotonin levels and dopamine levels rise up, they spike way beyond normal. So then when it's over, they crash way below normal. And cortisol, which is a stress hormone, can often rise out of that. And it's a difficult cycle to have any kind of mental equilibrium in. So that's why, to really, if you're walking a spiritual path to make some progress, you have to start to eliminate those extremes. It helps. I heard Mingyur Rinpoche mention that the top of the head can feel as it opens for meditation. This has happened to me at one point, but now it's subsided. I haven't found much about it online. I wonder if anyone experiences. I've never really experienced that. I guess I'm sure it's possible. I would, honestly, I don't think it's something to focus on. If it happens, it's it's much better just focusing on the meditation and the teachings, those kind of things. They kind of take care of themselves. That's my opinion. I just finished Cynicism Magic, and the karma part confused me. Holding on to good karma can become bad karma, which can become monstrous. I know the chapter you're talking about. It's an interesting concept. Let me see if I could find that exactly. This really comes out of talking about morality, the relationship between morality and karma. In some sense, they're working together, because morality is a state of awareness in which everything is looked at clearly and seen precisely. It's just like what we were talking about. However, this can go one of two ways. If you're trying to be good and generate more good karma, it's one way to relate to morality. Or awareness can transcend karma altogether. If your practice of morality isn't ego-oriented and your purpose is just to be for the sake of being, rather than to be in order to be good, then that type of awareness transcends karma. So if your practice is not ego-oriented, and your purpose is just to be for the sake of being, that transcends karma. True morality from that point of view can only develop through meditation. Otherwise, you have some object or aim. I think one of the problems, particularly for Westerners, is a sense of guilt. The popular notion of Christianity talks about a sense of guilt because something went wrong at the beginning, we have to pay it off. That becomes a problem. That kind of morality is definitely not good karma practice. It's just arousing further neurosis. If you have good karma, do you have a better chance of cutting through karma than if you have bad karma? He says, well, that is the theory, but if you hang on to your good karma too tightly, that could become bad karma. This is what you were talking about. If you regard it as righteous, important, or some absolutely fantastic possession that you have to defend or hold on to, then good karma sours a little bit and shifts to the side of bad karma. It's loose and sensitive, but good karma could be just like a memory or habitual pattern, or even like the practice of meditation. You remember that once somebody told you how to sit and practice meditation, and you do it again and again because it's your habit, and you know how to handle yourself and how to work with your techniques, including the mental habit part of karma. Things like that are regarded as good karma, which cuts itself automatically because you have just the memory of how to do it. Basically, what we're saying is, if you're just holding on to good karma without, without furthering yourself in the spiritual path and feeling like, well, I have this, everything's in equilibrium, my life is good, I'm happy, things are going well, there's a certain stagnation that can set in where you hold on to this, with tight grips, and now it's just about you maintaining this kind of relative comfort level rather than keep moving, keep expanding and moving on. And that attachment to that comfort level can exhaust the good karma and go into stagnation, and eventually it becomes kind of the opposite of generosity and greed and self-centeredness. I think that's what he's saying. Is it usually recommended to take the refuge vows before taking the bodhisattva vows? That's a really good question. I'm not sure, but as you see on that what Nick just showed us, which is from the Turgar website, which is Mingyur Rinpoche's website, there are no prerequisites. So I'm assuming you do not have to have taken refuge vows. What effect, if any, did the bodhisattva vow have on your meditation practice? It just it widens your view and your perspective. So it's not just about, you realize, we all most of us come to Buddhism meditation. A lot of you joined up on this class last year during the pandemic when we were all going through really hard times and a lot of stress and anxiety and uncertainty and mourning and loss, all kinds of things. And that's cool. That's okay, But as you get into the practice, you realize it's not just about us. It's really not. And the bodhisattva vow, puts that fact central, that our spiritual progress is directly linked to how we are going to help others progress spiritually in a way. I'm at a weird stage in my life where there's so many things making me miserable, and I have the power to remove those things, but there would be familial and financial consequences. Is it more beneficial to accept this misery and suffering or remove it? I mean, I can't speak to that without knowing detail. I really can't. I don't know. Making yourself miserable is probably never a good thing. I don't see how that could be beneficial. If you say familial consequences, well, then if it's beneficial for you, but people in your family suffer, then that doesn't sound, doesn't sound so good either. So I don't know. I really need to know specifics, but I think you just have to be really, really, really honest. And if you're walking this spiritual path and trying to practice Buddhist teachings, you have to, think about it and meditate on these things through that lens. And with that, let's dedicate the merit of today's class to the benefit of all beings, which is a very Mahayana bodhisattva concept. As we're saying, we're not dedicating the merit to us so that we may attain the state of enlightenment, conquer the enemies of faults and delusions, and be liberated from samsara. We're saying, by whatever merit, by engaging in this experience of meditating together and discussing the teachings and trying to walk a spiritual path together, whatever merit we may attain from this, we dedicate it for the benefit of all beings, and may they all attain the state of enlightenment. Let's say it. By this merit, may all beings attain the state of enlightenment, conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death.